in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. When the Empress Dowager toured Jiangnan last month, she set her eyes on Miss Yang's daughter. "Such a beautiful young lady should naturally become part of the royal family," she said. When speaking these words, the Empress Dowager's gaze seemed to inadvertently sweep toward my husband, Alexander Chen. He was the crown prince of the dynasty, and also my husband. During Miss Yang's grand ceremony, I stood before the palace gates with a sliver of hope and asked, "Can't even I enter?" The guards at the gate were my acquaintances, but they all lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at me. The Empress Dowager had said that others could enter, but the crown princess absolutely could not enter today. I nodded slightly, picked up the bundle I had prepared beforehand. When Alexander married me, I had just turned 15. That day I was gathering firewood in the forest, when an arrow suddenly flew from nowhere and struck me right in the chest. If not for the jade pendant on my chest blocking it, I might have met the king of hell early. A handsome young man saved me, saying his name was Alexander, a prince of the dynasty. His mother died early, and his status was low. Perhaps he was the only prince who had to compete with stray cats for food in the cold palace. I stayed by his side through 5 stormy years in the Forbidden Palace. When receiving the emperor's edict, I shielded it for him. When the prince fell into the water, I jumped into the pond pretending to be foolish to save him, making the nobles in the palace happy. I watched him step by step become the emperor's most favored son, which also elevated my status. The prestigious families in the capital had to respectfully call me Miss Emma when they met me. I had no surname, this was my name. Grandfather said I drifted here with the water current, so this name was appropriate. But my happiest moment was when Alexander knelt before the emperor and clearly stated he wanted to marry me. 7 years passed in a flash. The day I left the capital, I only had the jade pendant on me, but one corner was already broken. I shouldered my bundle and walked out of the crown prince's residence. The guards at the gate exchanged wary glances, then forced smiles to please me. One spoke up. "Is the crown princess going to the charity house again?" The charity house, where for years, rain or shine, Alexander and I would unfailingly go on the 15th of every month to stay for a day. Sometimes we brought clothes, sometimes we played with the homeless children. Unfortunately, later he became increasingly busy with tasks assigned by His Majesty, busy dealing with officials. He no longer had time to go there with me. Now Alexander had become the crown prince, bearing so many responsibilities. He no longer had the heart to care about the children at the charity house, nor to remember me. I nodded and said, "This time at the charity house, I'll stay longer. You don't need to come find me." Those people in the palace probably wished nothing more than for me not to disturb this beautiful marriage day and night. The crown prince's residence wasn't far from the imperial palace, so close I could almost hear the lively music from within the red walls. The joyful sound of bells mixed with the singers' voices, as if performing 10 lifetimes of cultivation to cross the river together, 100 lifetimes to share the same pillow, extremely lively. I had only taken a few steps from the palace gate when cheers suddenly erupted from the crowd. I turned back. From afar on the high tower, the newlyweds wore bright red wedding robes embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, faces radiant with bright smiles, tossing celebratory fruits and coins below. Alexander suddenly looked in my direction. On the palace tower, lanterns blazed brightly. I rubbed my eyes trying to see more clearly, but only saw him tightly embracing his bride, his radiant smile no different from our wedding night. Only our wedding ceremony wasn't as grand as today's. Back then, he was just the 5th prince under His Majesty, going against the current to marry a woman of unclear background. Now, as the crown prince of the dynasty, marrying Miss Yang from a prestigious family as his consort, fragmented memories suddenly flashed by, flickering between light and dark, as if experiencing another lifetime. The sky gradually darkened, looking like a heavy rain was coming. The merchants along the street had already packed up their shops early and rushed to the palace gates to join the celebration. I shouldered my bundle and entered the charity house. The alley outside was deserted, the children had gone to sleep early. Only Aunt Zhang, who usually prepared meals, was still bustling about preparing tomorrow's breakfast. She asked, "Is the crown princess planning to stay overnight?" Then quickly brought me a bowl of hot noodles, even adding an egg. She smiled brightly, bringing it before me. I just quietly took out items from my bundle one by one, only a few simple sets of clothes left. I said, "Leave these for all of you. After this, I'm afraid I won't be able to return for a long time." Aunt Zhang's expression slightly changed. She was naturally intelligent. Though she couldn't guess my intention to leave the capital, she understood that Alexander's taking of a consort troubled me. She said, "Crown Princess, please be generous. The Crown Prince cares for you deeply. This matter must be unavoidable." I smiled slightly. Deeply. Perhaps when he was still the fifth prince, Alexander deserved these words. After all, I rose from orphan status to become a princess consort, truly unprecedented. Power tilts toward those in power. Alexander remained decisive, but after becoming crown prince, I'm afraid this affection is something I can no longer bear. Aunt Zhang, seeing I said nothing, thought I was remembering Alexander's good points and continued advising me. "I heard Miss Yang is intelligent and courteous, with a gentle temperament. She will surely respect the crown princess." These words seemed to stick in my throat. The hot noodles suddenly became harder to swallow. The feeling of choking, unable to swallow yet unable to spit out. Everyone said Miss Yang came from a prestigious family, gentle and virtuous. Yet no one saw clearly her mocking and taunting toward me. She deliberately waited until guests visited, forcing the women to appear. When meeting many people, she cleverly suggested games I didn't know. When I was flustered and couldn't respond, she pretended to cover her mouth and laugh softly, then calmly spoke for me, saying, "Sister must have other talents not convenient to display at today's banquet." Alexander was silent, his expression showing displeasure. I had seen this expression before, when he faced noble ladies who deliberately made things difficult for me. Now that look was directed at me, who was being mocked at the banquet table. It seemed I had caused him to lose face. Indeed, he was no longer the Alexander of 7 years ago, no longer the one who sat all night in my room just to teach me each character when I couldn't read. No longer the impoverished prince who could smile happily just from me reciting a poem. Now he was His Highness the Crown Prince, high above, the future sovereign. A lump formed in my throat, anger and defiance making me stand up. "I know sword dancing," I said. Before Alexander could interrupt, his face darkened further. "This isn't something a crown princess should do." I was momentarily stunned. The night before he was appointed crown prince, he had promised me that no matter who he became, I only needed to be myself. After just one night, had those words already lost meaning? Did the crown princess hear clearly? The consort sat down beside me, her eyes carrying a hint of worry. I hummed in response. Actually, over the years I had tried to become a proper royal daughter-in-law. It was truly difficult to become a lady proficient in music, chess, poetry and painting in just 2 short years, compared to noble ladies like Victoria Young, who had excellent teachers from childhood. I couldn't sleep all night until the horizon was tinged with a faint pink. Dawn had broken. I wandered in the alley for a while, claiming to be afraid I'd clumsily forgotten something, but in my heart hoping for something else. I looked toward the end of the alley for a long time but saw no one come looking. When walking on the blue stone path to the boat dock, thick fog still covered the river surface. Until word spread, the morning fog suddenly dispersed. Perhaps it wasn't just the morning fog, but many other things too. Standing at the bow, I heard the old boatman say it would take several days by water to reach Linen. I paid half the silver on me to barely get a ticket. Not long after the boat left the dock, I heard children in the cabin singing. "Everyone says Jiangnan is beautiful, travelers should only stay in Jiangnan. In spring the water is blue, green like the sky, lying in the painted boat listening to the rain gently fall." This was a song I heard as a child. The last 2 lines were, "Returning to one's hometown while the scenery remains." But the children sang it as, "If the scenery remains one must break one's heart." Actually, this line wasn't right. Clearly one should break one's heart before returning to one's hometown. But why bother so much? It's just that this place no longer has room for me. Wind from the river blew the sails fluttering in the breeze. The boatman, seeing me standing motionless at the bow, showed curiosity in his eyes. I brushed back the hair tangled by the wind, my thoughts drifting. The waves I've encountered in life were perhaps much fiercer than these. When Alexander was still just an obscure 5th prince no one cared about, no one bothered about who stood beside him, whether that person could read or dance. until the South Sea pirate uprising occurred and the court had no one to use. Alexander, just turned 18, volunteered to petition His Majesty. I was accustomed to mountain and forest life from childhood. Though illiterate, I understood many ways of the world. Falling leaves signal autumn's arrival. Days pass like drifting wind, tides rise and fall, clouds gather and disperse. I followed him onto the ship, stomach churning, but still bent over the bow all night helping him predict wind and rain. Alexander trusted me. He could only trust me, because the court officials all belonged to other princes' factions. No one was willing to help him. And Alexander only had me. "Are you from Linen, miss?" the old boatman asked while pulling the rope tight. After seeing it was secure, he relaxed and added. I pressed my lips together, nodded, then shook my head. Maybe, maybe not. After all, I've never been to Linen. But my grandfather mentioned Jiangnan every day, saying sooner or later I would return to Lin. The old boatman rolled up his sleeves, unconcerned with my vague answer, just smiled and said Jiangnan was a land that nurtured people. If Miss stayed in Linen for half a year, surely no sorrow would remain on your brow. Though just casual words, he still noticed I wasn't happy. Who would know I was originally a girl from the outskirts of the capital? With the clearest laughter. It's been 3 days and he still hasn't returned. I asked myself quietly. The Crown Prince's residence was still covered in red silk not yet taken down. Alexander had just accompanied Victoria to the palace to pay respects to the newly appointed noble consort. The Empress Dowager's most beloved kept her back for some instructions. I could only sigh remembering the past. When I left the Crown Prince's residence, when I left saying I would stay at the charity house for a few days and not return, did she cause any commotion in the residence that day? Did she make things difficult for you? The guards lowered their heads even more, carefully answering. The Crown Princess wasn't in the residence that day. She left the residence, then returned, then left again. She didn't say anything more, just that she was going to the charity house. Alexander narrowed his eyes, a flash of displeasure in his gaze. No matter how pure her temperament before, once a woman entered the palace, she would surely devise countless schemes. She didn't cry or cause a scene as usual, only paying attention to mentions of the charity house from the servants' mouths, as if wanting to remind him of when he had once looked down on her and felt remorse, hoping to make him seek her out to coax her. But marrying Victoria, he had explained to her many times it was only to consolidate his position as Crown Prince. On the wedding day, he had made it clear to Victoria that he wouldn't love her, could only give her a child. What Alexander didn't expect was that a woman like Victoria would agree to this. At the Yang residence, she could have completely chosen another unmarried prince, but she insisted on loving him even as just a concubine. Victoria still shed 2 tears, saying she was willing to marry Alexander even as a concubine. Now instead, it seemed she paid more attention to her own feelings without considering Alexander's situation. Taking advantage of this time, despite his anger, Alexander also wanted to see if Emma would compromise for her own security. If Emma loved him, naturally she would understand his difficulties in this high position. His subordinate suggested going to find the Crown Princess. He waved it away. No need. Let her decide for herself. In his heart, Alexander was certain Emma no longer had him in her heart. Emma in the capital must be facing countless difficulties. She would surely return crying and begging him. But 5 days had passed, and the servants still had no news of the Crown Princess returning. Your Highness, don't worry. This servant heard from Sister's maid that many valuable items are missing from the courtyard. As long as Sister stays in this capital, she'll have everything she needs. Who could make things difficult for her? Alexander frowned, his eyes not leaving the door, showing restlessness. Victoria sighed softly, speaking with admiration. This concubine truly admires Sister's ability to come and go so freely. Every time she causes trouble, Your Highness stands behind to clean up. If it were this concubine, at home I would have to kneel in the ancestral hall. And in this capital I would surely be mocked by society. Alexander still said nothing, but his expression grew more solemn, clearly displeased. Report to Your Highness, the Crown Princess. The Crown Princess is not at the charity house. Alexander immediately stood up, his elaborate sleeves hitting the teacup on the table, breaking it. What did you say? The Crown Princess. The Crown Princess left all her clothing and belongings at the charity house and said what else? She said she wouldn't return for a while. Wouldn't return for a while, or never return. Victoria stood beside him, noticing the abnormality, a smile appearing at the corners of her eyes. Sister has been crown princess for so many years yet can still be so free, leave when she wants, disappear when she wants. Victoria truly admires her. Your Highness, don't worry. Sister surely isn't in any danger. She just wants your Highness to worry about her a bit. Though somewhat childish, perhaps this is how your Highness and sister live together. Alexander paused in thought, his steps gradually slowing. If not for 7 years of shattered trust, how could there be this moment of hesitation? Seeing Alexander standing still, Victoria knew her words had taken effect. She gently spoke, Your Highness didn't eat much breakfast. Shall this concubine have them prepare some light refreshments? No need. Alexander replied, still uneasy, and strode quickly toward Emma's courtyard. He walked very fast, faster and faster. Dark clouds in the distance had covered the sky, perhaps the capital would have heavy rain. The vegetable plots in Emma's courtyard looked weak and withered. Only one maid remained nearby, standing before the fence worriedly wringing her handkerchief. Your Highness, the crown princess always did everything herself, not letting servants interfere. The maid said with an aggrieved expression. Alexander remembered when he was still in difficult circumstances, often eating this meal without knowing about the next. If people from the imperial kitchen came, it was considered a lucky day. But if on the road they were stopped by other princes or His Majesty, it was considered bad luck arriving. After saving Emma, he never thought a prince could fall into such difficult circumstances as to worry about food and clothing. After wandering several days in the square courtyard, one afternoon he suddenly burst out laughing. He said, Soon we'll have our own kitchen. Only then did Alexander realize that these past days Emma wasn't pondering when to leave, but thinking about how to plant in this barren garden. Plant vegetables in spring, harvest fruits in autumn, sow peaches and plant plums, bring spring breeze to the garden. Emma found a hoe somewhere, tied it tightly with old rope. She muttered something, then planted vegetables and fruits in half the garden. This desolate place suddenly became as lively as the 100 Flowers banquet in the Empress's palace. Thinking of this, Alexander suddenly burst out laughing, because he had never attended any 100 Flowers banquet. Even last year's autumn festival, he only got to participate thanks to the second prince finding a substitute. Alexander stood under the eaves for a while, as if hearing Emma's voice by his ear. Grandfather is harvesting beans on the west side. Emma corrected herself, then he corrected himself again. Why is it wrong? Clearly it's elder brother harvesting beans on the west side, second brother fixing the chicken coop. Emma didn't know characters, but was good at growing vegetables, cooking, and knew a bit of three-legged cat kung fu. That day when falsely accused by the second prince's consort mother with just a few words placed all blame on Alexander. By the time Emma found out, Alexander's back was already covered in bloody wounds. Emma practically flew to Consort Jin's palace, rolling and crawling, disregarding everything. She had once saved the ninth prince from drowning, so Consort Jin had promised her one wish. On the high steps of Xianxia Palace, Emma didn't notice and suddenly fell, scraping her chin and drawing blood. The person was saved, but the scar remained. In the fierce wind and rain, Alexander slowly entered the room, his gaze immediately falling on the arrow hanging on the wall. The very arrow that had struck Emma. At that time, Emma's wounds had just healed not long ago. It was also the Dragon Boat Festival. His Majesty suddenly decided to hold a banquet for officials at the traveling palace. Alexander, because of being falsely accused, received some guilt from His Majesty and was among the princes going to the traveling palace. This time was different from the strictly guarded imperial palace. The traveling palace was bustling with people coming and going, from theater troupes to acrobatic groups. Somehow an assassin infiltrated. Only a white light flashed, aimed straight at His Majesty. Emma appeared from nowhere. While everyone panicked, she rushed forward using her back to block that sword strike for the emperor. An old wound not yet healed, now a new wound added. Alexander panicked, frantically embracing Emma's wound, voice trembling. You'll be fine, Emma, you'll be fine. These words seemed to comfort the person in his arms, but also seemed to reassure himself. Emma survived once more. When His Majesty rewarded merit, he asked what reward she wanted. Emma respectfully bowed, speaking very sincerely. The fifth prince often says everything must put His Majesty first. Protecting the sovereign is this servant's duty, no reward needed. The vast hall suddenly fell silent. The emperor's cold gaze rested on Alexander for a moment, somewhat moved. At that time Alexander treasured Emma like precious jade. Knowing her life wasn't in danger, Alexander couldn't help asking, "Why did you risk your life to shield his majesty?" Emma's lips curved in a smile, half genuine, half teasing. Everything must put the fifth prince first. But if Alexander could receive Father Emperor's favor, no longer scorned by society, then everything would be worthwhile. The entire palace was immersed in brilliant lights. Alexander held Emma tightly, determined not to let go. "Emma, even if I die, I won't fail you. What about taking Victoria?" Alexander originally didn't want to marry, only because of the Empress Dowager's advice. She once said Emma was a calculating schemer who could even use her own life to calculate. It was that statement that shook Alexander. If Emma won the gamble, glory and wealth would be easily grasped. If she lost, she would just leave the palace and return to her former life. The Empress Dowager said even in her position today, her methods might not match Emma's. Yet Alexander had never thought that no matter how skilled a calculator, they couldn't predict the day of their death. If that sword had gone a bit deeper that day, there would be no Emma in this world, and glory would just be clothes for others. In that moment between life and death, that sincerity was now explained away with such convoluted words. Alexander sat in the room for a long time until a palace maid brought lanterns in. Did she say where she was going? The sudden question startled the palace maid, who quickly knelt. "Reporting to your highness, that day this servant was also arranged to help at the consort's courtyard, and didn't meet the crown princess." Alexander angrily threw the teacup down before the palace maid. "Is everyone in the residence dead? Why did you also have to go help?" The palace maid fearfully kowtowed, desperately begging for mercy. "Your highness, spare me. That day Madame Zhang beside the Empress Dowager personally came, saying this was an important royal matter and we must help the consort organize properly." Royal important matter. Remembering his wedding day with Emma, the Empress Dowager didn't even bestow a jade bracelet, let alone personally send her education mama. "What else did the Empress Dowager say?" Alexander asked. The Empress Dowager also said the crown princess was crude and ignorant of propriety. As long as she didn't appear, that would be helping. Perhaps Madame Zhang's harsh words made Emma feel the deep palace walls were truly cold, no longer able to linger. On the bumpy road, the boatman told me about his family during idle times. He worked piloting boats while his family ran a tofu shop, but business was just average. The trading wasn't very prosperous. Thanks to his added wages, the family of 8 could eat their fill. Only his son would need to attend school in the coming years, adding to the financial burden. I left him a recipe for cooking soy sauce, saying to add fresh mushrooms, chicken giblets and some fragrant oil. Tofu with this soy sauce would be fresher and more appealing than other shops. The old boatman joyfully praised my beautiful handwriting repeatedly. My characters were personally taught by Alexander. His writing, learned at the Imperial Study, belonged to many different schools. I practiced hard for 2 years but was still mocked by Victoria as chicken scratch. At that time, Emma's expression briefly changed, unclear whether because the writing was too poor or because the person had become unbearable. The old boatman asked, "Young lady traveling alone so far from the capital, will your family be at ease?" Family. After grandfather passed away, I was alone in this world. Did Alexander count as my family? Or did his father emperor, mother empress and imperial grandmother count as my family? If so, they probably wished I would leave. I have no family. The old boatman had met countless people on his boat. Seeing my way of dress, he pondered. The world is difficult, a woman's lot even more bitter. Why is young lady so stubborn? These words sounded so familiar. He had once said the same to me. I only take her as a consort, not out of romantic feelings. She is a concubine, you are my wife. He once told me, Emma, I want to become crown prince, so I can only marry Victoria. But with my concessions time and time again, things became like this. I thought Miss Yang was just a flower without fragrance, but turns out she had talents in poetry, calligraphy and painting. Emma, look at this landscape painting. Who would have thought Miss Victoria had read 10,000 books and traveled 10,000 miles? He said she didn't know how to appreciate paintings. I'll have someone bring it to the palace for the Empress Dowager. Surely Miss Yang will have deeper insights. Emma, I will marry her, We'll give her a child, but only one. Don't be stubborn with me. A woman's determination is often seen as stubborn willfulness. When Alexander said those words, the teacup on the table suddenly spilled. Small water droplets wet my skirt hem, making one side of my body hot. All words seemed blocked at my lips. When did this life become so difficult? Was it when the Empress Dowager decreed the marriage? Or from the day Alexander accepted compromise? Or perhaps from last night, during that wedding celebration with 10,000 people rejoicing? I thought and thought. Perhaps it was from the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet. That day Alexander and Victoria met at the feast. She insisted I compose poetry about the scenery. I was now Alexander's wife and naturally didn't want to embarrass him. My eyes anxiously looked at him, but he was only absorbed in admiring that painting with fascination. A noble lady beside us mocked. Why does the fifth prince's wife keep staring at the fifth prince? Could there be a poem on his face? I was momentarily flustered, not knowing how to respond. Victoria then gently covered her mouth with her pear blossom embroidered handkerchief and laughed. Hasn't this concubine already of a poem? Stranger like jade, young master without equal. Praises rang out from all the banquet tables. Actually, I had memorized this poem too, but why was it praised as excellent when she recited it? Later I learned this was Victoria secretly expressing her feelings to Alexander. The pear blossoms on the handkerchief were his favorite flower. He even planted pear trees outside his study because his birth mother's name contained the character for pear. In the carriage returning, Alexander still embraced the painting, his gaze never leaving it. I sighed softly. It's just a poem, nothing so terrible. I looked at him with some regret. Alexander seemed unchanged yet had changed greatly. He clearly knew I understood nothing of poetry, so why make me compose? With his belly full of learning, how could he not understand Victoria's meaning? Thinking too much only adds troubles. Not thinking is fine too. Spring comes to linen with fresh scenery. Black, awned boats call out rhythmically on the calm green river surface. The boatman seemed uneasy, poking his head out from under the canopy to repeatedly instruct, "Go straight down Bluestone Alley at East Market. About 50 steps in is a blacksmith shop run by my distant relative. If young lady needs help, find him. He's very trustworthy." I forced a smile in response. I'll remember. Touching the silver in my pocket, only enough to last 3 more years. Linen was prosperous with many wealthy families often needing help with odd jobs. Today this family taking concubines, tomorrow that family celebrating a baby's first month. The steward stood at Bluestone Street stroking his goatee. With just one call, the women at the alley entrance all hoped to grab good work. Not just for generous wages, but if the masters were pleased, even leftover food might be distributed. Perhaps because I'd lived in plenty these past 2 years, I felt awkward competing with them for work. But people must eat to live. If I didn't stop in linen, I wouldn't have travel money to go elsewhere. After thinking for a long while, I decided to return to my old trade. Grandfather often said even one bowl of wontons raised me to adulthood. If not for wanting to make a pot of fresh broth, I wouldn't have gone to the forest to pick mushrooms that day, wouldn't have met Alexander. From the side alley came sounds of children arguing. I hesitated then peeked over. Several 8 or 9-year-olds surrounded a smaller boy. "Your mother birthed you but didn't raise you. Your father doesn't want you. Nobody needs you either." A crowd stood watching like it was entertainment. Clearly it was an image from my own childhood appearing. I immediately chased away the bullies. Wind swept through the corridor as 2 figures, one big one small, sat on the moss-covered steps. Little Ryan's eyes were red as he said, "I'm not someone nobody needs." I nodded. "I'm not either. I just don't have a mother. I don't even have a father. But they all do. I'm the same as you have no one, but I'm stronger than them. Just standing is enough to scare them into running away." I broke half my flour cake for Ryan, proudly raising my head. Ryan was young and easily convinced. He looked at me with eyes sparkling with admiration and longing. "Later I want to be like you too, have a future." I smiled without speaking. If he knew I was currently wandering the streets, would he still want to be like me? After parting with Ryan, I unconsciously walked to Lynn's busiest district, crossing the bridge and asking passersby. I learned that to set up a stall here required a permit from the local magistrate. But where would I get silver to rent a space? The sun was directly overhead. The crowds on the bridge were packed thick, making my eyes blur. Would young lady like to stop and rest a bit? I turned around, my gaze meeting a man in thin robes standing before me. Not an acquaintance. If young lady walks a few more steps, I'm afraid you'll accidentally turn into the revival medicine shop. The man continued patiently. I frowned looking at him, only then noticing Ryan's figure lurking behind a pillar. I came to my senses. Before me was Ryan's father, probably named Marcus Wu. Marcus made his living as a blacksmith. Though his voice was somewhat deep, it sounded very reliable. He heard from Ryan that I had helped him, so he invited me in for some water. If you don't mind. I looked around, thinking if I set up a wonton stall right in front of this blacksmith shop, business would surely be quite smooth. Moreover, the front of the blacksmith shop still had empty space, might as well make use of it. Entering, I drank 2 bowls of coarse tea straight to dispel the awkwardness, then hesitantly asked, I heard setting up a stall here is quite troublesome. If one shop has 2 trades, would they turn a blind eye? The sound of hammering suddenly stopped, making me lower my head worriedly. He said, young lady can just use half the first month's income as rent. I looked up startled, asking in surprise, you already agreed. He smiled and said, this shop is rented by me anyway. Young lady's stall in front should pay some rent too. I felt a warm current flow through my heart, nodding and smiling in response. Marcus put down his hammer, looking at me seriously, trying to appear sharp. I replied, wouldn't you be at a disadvantage? A new stall won't have customers right away. He laughed softly. I've already considered the worst-case scenario. Seeing I still hesitated, he smiled and added, if young lady is still worried, then include meals for us father and son. Adding 2 more mouths to feed isn't a big deal. I still tried to persuade, but you should think carefully. Eating the same thing gets tiresome. Remembering years past when delicacies from the imperial kitchen floated palace, brocade clothes, making Alexander rarely touch the food I cooked anymore. I only knew how to use the most common ingredients. Simple dishes were often easily tired of. He laughed heartily. Having something to eat is good enough. Marcus picked up his hammer and returned to the back courtyard to continue work. The fire from the forge shone on his sun-darkened face, radiating a small ray of hope in my drifting life. When the hammer struck resonantly, large beads of sweat rolled from his neck down his back. I nodded lightly in thanks. If business goes well, I'll pay you extra. The wonton stall had barely been open half a month when there were already long lines of people waiting to buy. Later, when customers became too numerous, I had Ryan go to Blue Stone Alley to find a capable woman to help, just working half days for a full day's wage. People eating wontons in the morning and evening also liked listening to music by the lake, ordering some fish soup to enjoy. Marcus happily chewed freshly made wontons. Though piping hot, he didn't mind blowing lightly before popping them right in his mouth. After cleaning the last bowls and chopsticks, I finally had the mood to chat. This broth is my grandfather's secret recipe. Not like others who just use clear water with a sprinkle of dried shrimp for richness. Grandfather often added homemade soy sauce, a bit of rice vinegar, a little sesame oil and some lard. Finally sprinkled with scallions and pickled vegetables. The taste truly is unforgettable. After listening, Marcus smiled. Grandfather, you're talented. You're quite capable yourself. The sun slanted westward. Ryan just returned from school and immediately grabbed a bowl, wolfing down 3 bowls of wontons before putting down his spoon. Mouth smiling brightly. Emma's wontons are the best in linen. He continued, today my essay was praised by the teacher as showing clear improvement, thanks to Emma's good teaching. Ryan paused as if thinking, then suddenly asked, did Aunt Wang really say marrying Emma costs 100 taels of silver? Ryan talked a lot. I only responded briefly, not expecting my casual words with Mrs. Wang to reach him. The hammering suddenly became chaotic for a while. I thought for a moment, then answered seriously, indeed, must have a full 100 taels to come propose. Ryan fell silent, his eyes occasionally glancing at his father. Father seems to have written in the account book, he said softly. Indeed, Marcus hadn't lied to me. When I first arrived in Lin, unaccustomed to the climate, the wonton stall had only been open a short while before I fell ill for half a month. Marcus took me countless times to the revival medicine shop at the bridge turn. From then on, the courtyard was filled with the overwhelming smell of northern herbs day and night, unpleasantly strong. A giant 8-foot-tall man squatted by the medicine stove all day, frowning with a palm leaf, drowning out even the hammer sounds. I felt bad and gave him my jade pendant. This jade I'll leave with you as collateral for the medicine fees. I'll repay you the full amount later." Marcus examined the pendant for a while, then said lightly, "Half the wanton stall's profit share will do." After recovering, I still took medicine for a long time, but the taste seemed to have changed, becoming richer. Half a month later I saw a small figure slip past the window. Ryan came looking for me, holding a small account book with a faded cover. "Emma," he said, "Father hasn't bought me candied haws lately. Is our family out of money?" I laughed softly, thinking father and son weren't very clever at all. The father mixed shop accounts with daily expenses. The son even showed his father's account book to me, an outsider, to examine. During the 2 months I was bedridden, the ledger didn't show much expense, only some large unpaid debts from the previous month. But clearly not to the point of being unable to afford candied haws. Perhaps Marcus was afraid Ryan would get a stomachache from eating them, so didn't buy any. I quickly thought of an excuse to brush it off, until I saw my name in the ledger. This month's 2 taels of silver had become a negative number, and last month's 5 ties were all spent on medicine, so all that expense was for me. The back and forth accounting ultimately left exactly 100 taels. 100 taels is enough. Behind me, the hammering resumed, but no longer steady and heavy as before. 7 years passed. Linen's osmanthus bloomed brilliantly golden throughout the city. The wanton stall in front of the blacksmith shop was gone. The whole city rushed to the riverside to see the new pleasure boats. I made the excuse that the braised meat in the kitchen needed tending and that Lily would be home from school soon. Linen, though far from the capital, still received news quickly. These past years, many things happened in the capital. Yang's concubine gave birth to a prince. The eldest son was forced to become the primary consort, and now she had become the new emperor's imperial noble consort. People gossiped that her consort ceremony was held to impress standards, but despite such honor, she wasn't the official empress. Sitting in the tea house, I heard this and that gossip and couldn't help feeling melancholy. People said that emperors still remembered the crown princess from back then. Hearing this, Lily turned and asked, "I like mother and don't want anyone else to be my mother. If he has someone he loves, why marry someone else? If he already married someone else, why keep remembering the past?" I wanted to explain to her that in this world there wasn't just feelings between people, but also desire for power and fame. People pursue fame and fortune, but for a 5-year-old like Lily, this was hard to understand and heavy. So I just told her perhaps that wasn't the person he truly loved, or perhaps it wasn't that important. Not the most beloved person, not the most important thing. Alexander suffered much hardship from childhood. The meals in his hands were always cold. When bullied, he only knew to hold his head and endure. He lived in the most desolate palace without servants or attendants. Only when I was brought into the palace by him did I hear that to save me, he had given all his battle spoils to the second prince and promised the second prince he would pretend to fall from a horse before the emperor, appearing bruised before everyone. At that time everyone laughed until they cried, thinking Alexander was just useless. Only I knew that every day he rose 2 time periods earlier than others, diligently studying and practicing martial arts, then pretending ignorance to serve other princes at the Hanlin Academy. Speaking of scheming, who could compare to Alexander? Lily returned home with a mud-smeared face, followed by someone who should have been on the pleasure boat. He stood right at the door, eyes red. When I turned to look at him with this pitiful appearance, surely I had done something wrong to him. "Mother, did you rob his things?" Lily looked at me suspiciously. "You always tell me not to rob from others." "It's true, I've searched for her everywhere. Emma. I remember the day I saved His Majesty and escaped death by a hair's breadth." He had the same joyful expression, but now beside Alexander were countless trusted followers. What game was Alexander playing? Lily suddenly became alert, abruptly pushing Alexander. "You stinking scoundrel. You said you liked my sachet, so I brought you to meet mother." Lily gritted her teeth. You're not allowed to look at my mother anymore. And don't call mother's name." I remembered in the palace I once did embroidery carrying my feelings. No one taught me needlework, I created my own style. He recognized my needle and thread work wasn't strange at all. At that moment, Alexander unconsciously stepped forward. The 2 attendants behind him also instinctively wanted to act. I quickly pulled Lily behind me and said, "Go inside and wash that dirty little face clean. If it's not clean, don't come out. Lily wanted to protest, but seeing my expression wasn't joking. She pouted and grumbled a few words, then returned to her room. After I pushed Lily inside, Alexander immediately stepped forward several paces, tightly grasping my sleeve and saying, "Return to the palace with me. I haven't broken my promise. The Empress position, I've only kept it for you." I pulled my hand from his, almost bursting into laughter. "Kept for me? Your Majesty, you're joking. How can an Empress position be kept for someone who died 7 years ago?" 7 years ago, he had announced throughout the realm that the crown princess died of serious illness. At that time I was truly ill with sudden high fever, making me see grandfather in my dreams. If not for Marcus noticing my room light never went out and worrying, telling Sarah to check on me, perhaps I wouldn't have survived. 2 months later I recovered, but my heart had gradually grown cold. A feeling of relief yet piercing pain in that moment. I didn't understand why 7 years of feelings couldn't compare to a crown prince position. Clearly he still had time, perhaps other ways. But after that illness, I understood no one could resist the temptation of power so easily. Today, whether Zhao Qin, Lu Kai, whether Li Shu or Alexander, no one could give it up. And the one abandoned could only be me. Even when I had fever to the point of nearly losing consciousness, the tears from my eyes still fell hot, burning my heart like years ago when I was struck by Alexander's arrow. Only this time, the arrow pierced deep into my heart. I understand you don't blame me for marrying Victoria. But I was forced then with no other choice. From now on I won't do things you dislike anymore. Come back with me. Now I stand above 10,000 people. No one can make me do what I don't want anymore. Didn't we struggle for today? I stepped back, eyes cold, stepping on me then saying it was our day. This is only what you wanted, not what I hoped for. Alexander panicked, wanting to grab my hand but I dodged. His hand froze mid-air, eyes full of brokenness. No, it's not like that, he said. I also knew it wasn't like hat because I had heard Alexander and Victoria's conversation in the study that day. I stood outside hearing her say, "This concubine is a woman who understands a woman's heart better than anyone. A woman marrying is like being born a second time." Sister Emma was originally an orphan noticed by the 5th prince, already great fortune. The 5th prince marrying her, she became crown princess, later to be empress. Today you promised to give her that position. Not just Sister Emma, any woman in the world should feel she bet correctly. Between people, beginnings are always beautiful. Only at the end do we realize it's best not to begin. In the courtyard, a few pear trees still had scattered petals. Wind passed, the last petal fell. Thinking too much, I could only sigh softly. Alexander, that day I married you, not the 5th prince, certainly not the crown prince. Everyone knows the emperor's 5th son, frankly speaking, wasn't even as good as a dog raised in the palace. Marrying anyone would be better than marrying you. When you misunderstood me, I tried my best to prove myself. But later I thought, at least I knew what kind of person I was in your heart. Words are indeed difficult. Victoria read many books with a clever, shrewd heart, understanding both men and women. When she spoke, she quoted classics endlessly. When she splashed mud on someone, I could only endure and bear it. I didn't expect when you saw me splashed with mud, you didn't even offer me a handkerchief, but instead called me dirty. I once suspected if you weren't using me, if there was sincerity between us, why would you think I was skimming for glory? Later, because you yourself were that kind of person. Sitting on a small boat, not scrutinized by anyone, taking in an orphan girl, hiding among commoners to deceive the world, every step calculated. It's my fault. I shouldn't have doubted you, shouldn't have let you suffer humiliation. Please forgive me, Emma. Clearly those 7 years we overcame so many difficulties, Alexander. My life won't have just 7 years like that. What meaning do 7 years have? Life originally has so many things that exhaust the heart and blood yet ultimately come to nothing. Without experiencing difficulty, can't see through a person clearly. I spent 7 years to understand Alexander thoroughly, then another 7 years to understand others. I can't let 7 years bind me. Emma, even if I use the empire as a betrothal gift, you still won't forgive me. Hearing this, my heart seemed unable to grasp the meaning clearly. Must apologies be forgiven? An apology after hurt was no different from an insult to me. I immediately interrupted frankly. Alexander, having done wrong, apologies aren't needed anymore. I don't want to forgive you, but if I don't forgive, I appear unreasonable. 7 years ago you insistently said you loved me yet still married Victoria, acting noble by only giving her one child. In the palace, many made things difficult for me, but the one who made me decide to leave was you. The one who never protected me and even doubted me. Those suffocating days, only I understood, the past days cannot return. I don't want to return either. Now I have a son and daughter. I humbly ask your majesty to make way for a woman like me. Alexander closed his eyes sadly. Returning to the palace with me is a dead end. Disappointment piled into mountains. Living days without joy or sorrow, can that still be called living? Mountains originally aren't sad because of snow turning white. Water originally doesn't worry because of wind raising waves. Now Alexander, you're like that snow, like that wind. Please don't appear before me. That is the most sincere apology. Yellow leaves fell, lying on green moss. The front door closed. The sound of carriages gradually faded. The one who shouldn't come finally left. Winter snow cold. Ryan and Lily sat by the fireplace, eyes staring intently at the roasted sparrows, drooling. Beside them, Sarah brought a jug of warm wine looking for me. As soon as she opened her mouth, she asked if I knew about recent major events. I shook my head slightly, saying lately Ryan's matters troubled me so much I lost sleep. This child saw me practice staff once and now stubbornly wants to learn. Sarah sighed softly, gesturing toward the old cake seller at West Market, seemingly accidentally mentioning she wasn't as sharp-eared anymore. I heard the young family of High City is in great chaos this time. Victoria often said I was deeply skimming. Actually, she was the chess piece placed on Alexander's shoulders. Thinking stepping on me, an orphan girl, would easily ascend to empress. Who knew Alexander would be so stubborn? These years the Yang family applied considerable pressure, thinking with the merits Alexander established they could force His Majesty. Alexander was never a dog caged in a pen but a wolf accustomed to killing. He acted very quickly, immediately finding faults with Yang County's magistrate and ordering investigation. In early winter snow at the capital, the entire Yang family was exiled. Victoria was deposed from noble consort for inciting discord and banished to the cold palace. Now all linen storytellers spread that the one sitting on the dragon throne was infatuated, unclear who occupied the important position in his heart. Sarah surely didn't know Alexander married me to reduce his influence, just a temporary measure. Those feelings were secondary matters. If she knew, would she still admire him? Seeing I didn't respond, Sarah leaned close and lowered her voice. I also heard His Majesty's health is somewhat unstable now. I heard the bitter northern herbs from your father have all been collected. I gently reminded Sarah. She suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, my medicinal herbs," and hurriedly ran out, even forgetting her umbrella. I peeled a freshly roasted sparrow and put it in my mouth. Sweet flavor spread, so sweet. Before I could sip hot tea, I suddenly saw Marcus carrying 2 bolts of precious silk into the house, clothes still covered in dust and straw. He hurriedly stepped before me, smile hesitant, eyes bright as stars. New Year is coming. Let me make you a new outfit. I gently touched the silk, heart both pained and moved. How much silver did this cost? Marcus smiled awkwardly, showing bright white teeth, embarrassedly answering. You save a little silver for me every month. I don't spend anything. Still short a bit, so I did some loading work at the docks for a few trips to afford this silk. And your jade pendant. He returned that precious item to me. I looked carefully, it was the jade that once blocked an arrow that night. But what about the crack? I had a merchant get it repaired in the next town. Thought broken things couldn't be fixed, but turns out with care, anything can be done. I unconsciously remembered when Alexander left, he asked me one last question. Just 100 taels of silver can marry you. I shook my head and answered him. He spent everything to marry me. 100 taels was all Marcus had. Alexander stood pondering, then said softly, "Clearly I gave you the best things." I bent slightly to collect the clothes drying on the line, then went inside. Linen rarely had snow, yet this year the weather suddenly changed. With Ryan and Lily at the city wall burning fireworks, suddenly snow began falling lightly from the sky, drifting gently. Walking a stretch, seeing the road snow ankle deep, Marcus suddenly stepped forward 2 paces, instructing me to follow in my husband's footsteps to avoid slipping. Ryan cleverly slipped to the back, letting his sister follow mother's footprints at the end of the line. Wind and snow still pressed heavily on shoulders, but now the wind was gentle, snow like cotton, nothing to fear. Early spring at the dock, willows showed hints of tender green. The old boatman who chatted with me 7 years ago now had his own fleet, often bringing wife and children to Linen to see the distant scenery. My cousin, also my husband, from Bluestone Alley going east 50 steps. Who knew this would be where I belonged? When mother asks when will uncle arrive, Lily is very hungry. I raised my head looking at the sky, seeing warm gentle sun on the river surface, peach and pear blossoms blooming to welcome spring wind. Waiting at the dock. Naturally we'll meet. This story teaches us that true love isn't measured by grand gestures or social status, but by genuine care and everyday devotion. Emma found real happiness not with Emperor Alexander who offered her an empire but couldn't protect her dignity, but with Marcus the blacksmith who spent his last penny to marry her. Sometimes we must have the courage to walk away from toxic relationships, no matter how powerful the person or how deep the history. The greatest treasures in life, respect, trust, and unconditional love, cannot be bought with wealth or power, only earned through consistent actions and pure hearts.